Yeah, I see you now,
Can you hear me?
but I don't hear you.
Boy, I don't know why that is. Gee.
All right, try now.
Um, can you
There
hear
you
me
go.
at all?
I can hear you.
Oh,
Oh,
great. Oh,
goodness.
good. I don't know what was going on, but now we've got it.
Now we got it. Good.
Okay, great. Well, appreciate your doing this. Here's the situation. I'm part of my study is to take a look at the financial issues that entrepreneurs run into, and I know um, that you had at least a couple of issues. The one that really strikes home is when you first started out, you were selling just coffee,
Yes.
and it wasn't quite enough volume to generate enough income, and so you decided that you needed to have food,
Right.
and that required an investment for a grease trap.
Hmm.
And I just wonder, do you recall any of the numbers, like what what your volume was and what your losses were and how that changed?
Um, I just remember when I started serving food, our sales jumped 30%. So
Uh-huh.
from the day that we started, it was just a big pop, and it was a big pop right away.
How far into your venture was it when you started having food?
I want to say maybe um, probably 6, 7, 8 years, maybe somewhere in
Was
that
it that
neighborhood.
long?
It might
Really?
have been that long, even. Yeah.
Wow. And were you making any money, or was it just kind of break even, or?
No meaningful money. I mean, a lot of
Uh-huh.
it was, I think I was shifting a lot with um, kind of robbing Peter to pay Paul type of thing. So there
Uh-huh.
wasn't any money left at the end of the day. I wasn't really enjoying uh, the work that I was doing, or
Yeah.
the labors of my work. So
Okay.
Grease Trap was a big important part of it, where, um, as I guess going back to the beginning, I had confidence because I hit my financial targets pretty much right off the bat, and
Now that was sales or profits
that
or
was
both?
that was sales. That was sales.
Sales. Okay.
Yep. So I thought confident because it's like, oh well, we're hitting pretty much the mark that I set out to do. So therefore, it must just keep on going like a hockey stick up, and I'm going to be rich and famous and everything else.
Yeah.
But when summer hit on my very first year, is when I realized that all the students left campus. And when
Yeah.
they left, our sales dropped dramatically. And I just remember a 40% drop that first summer that I was in business.
Wow.
So it was just, the lights turned off basically.
Did you
So
have to keep pumping money into the business?
I did. I mean, a lot of it was I didn't have much money, like personally. I didn't have a bank account full of money where I was
Yeah.
able to kind of keep on shifting money into it. But I did have the line of credit, and I started pushing off a lot of my payments. There's the payments that you needed to do right away, like rent, and a lot of my vendors. I started pushing the terms out of.
Uh-huh.
So that made me last through summer. And then once the fall hit, that's when everything kind of, where we saw the big bump again in terms of
Right.
sale. So things
Do you,
started.
were you profitable then when the students came back in the
Um,
fall?
I So profits for me, you can show accounting profit, whether it means anything or not. I mean, that was the other thing. I mean, you can make. My thought was that you can play with the numbers enough in order to show an accounting profit. To me, it was more about the cash flow and
Uh-huh.
having that cash in the bank to sustain me through the breaks in the school year and also the summers.
Uh-huh.
So I just kind of want to. Profitability to me was money in the bank.
Right.
So
Right.
there were times when there wasn't much money in the bank, and then there was times that there was money in the bank, but I knew I needed to save that in order to make it into the hard times.
Uh-huh.
So, as I started the business, um, I was very, I was very traditional with the way that I did coffee. I wanted to be, I wanted to serve espressos, I wanted to serve cappuccinos, and to a group of people that didn't exist. So when I started looking at my numbers, my books, and our profitability, it was just kind of like, what are we really good at? And that was espresso preparation. And how can we use that in order to make more money? So we started developing a lot of signature drinks and signature espresso based drinks. So once we did that, they became fun. And a lot of students who weren't the hardcore coffee drinkers that, that weren't used to drinking the traditional coffee drinks found this as a way to drink coffee, but have something that they enjoyed.
So it's more
Oh,
fun.
yeah. So I equate it to like, if you serve someone that is a non-drinker, a scotch on the rocks, they're going to be like, this is disgusting. This is gross. I don't want this. But if you serve them something like a Jack and Coke, they're going to be like, oh, I recognize the flavor of the Coke. It's got alcohol in it. I'm getting drunk. This is great.
Uh-huh.
So, that equates to what I was doing. A cappuccino is very traditional. It's like, if you give someone a cappuccino, they're not going to enjoy the flavors of it. But if you give them something with, chocolate in it, raspberry, you name it, they're going to be like, I taste the raspberry. I taste the sweetness of this. It's still got the shot of espresso in it, and this is good. So
Okay.
once I started serving those specialty drinks, our business started ticking up. So from that point, it was like, all right, you catch up on all your old bills that have been outstanding. And I guess it got to the point where, I changed the menu. I increased prices. We're doing things in order to bring in more profitability into the company. But it got to the point of like, this is at a break even level, like there's certain times during the school year where it's great and, we're making money, but come the summer or Christmas breaks, Thanksgiving breaks, end of the semester where we don't have as much volume of people coming in, we weren't making any money. So that's when I realized that I really needed to do something drastic in order to change the trajectory of the profitability. And then that's where the food portion came in.
Okay, I didn't realize it was that far into the venture though, 6 or 7 years
Yeah.
before you started doing food.
Yeah.
Now, were you getting monthly financials, or were you managing it out of your checkbook, or how did you know what was going on financially?
I use QuickBooks as my accounting software.
Uh-huh.
So QuickBooks is great where you can do your accounting reports and get all that information there.
Yeah, yeah. Did you do that early on?
I did it early on. Yep. I mean, that was
Uh-huh.
one of the things that was always exciting for me. The accounting aspect was something that I always liked to follow and I always liked to do. But I guess what I realized is if I could skip forward,
Yeah.
I always had that mind or that interest in accounting and
Mm-hmm.
kind of like, all right, how do we build this? How do we make this better? And when I did food, when I had the cafe, and then when I started the kiosk business and the catering business, what I realized is that I didn't have a system to harmonize all three businesses together to show the
Mm-hmm.
profitability and the behaviors that I needed in order to become more profitable. And
Mm-hmm.
that's when I essentially developed a spreadsheet that harmonized the entire business. And what it was essentially to me was almost you could call it like a business model or a business plan that was all based on the numeric values of the business. So
Uh-huh.
therefore, I had it broken down into cost of goods, to labor, to my facilities cost, and also non-facilities cost. So from those buckets, I was able to drill down into the expenses that I actually had and see where I was spending money, how I was spending money, and also project what I expect to make in that month and what behaviors that I needed to do in order to make the money that I wanted to make.
Now, were these three separate P&Ls, or was it all one
It was
of
all
them with,
one.
it was one?
It was all one. Yep.
Uh-huh,
So I
okay,
used Roast Coffee Company is kind of the is a hub that everything flows through. So all my hiring goes through Roast Coffee Company. All the cost of goods, everything flows through Roast Coffee Company. But I have
okay,
it broken down into Roast Coffee Catering for my event side of the business and Roast Coffee Kiosk for the events and festivals business.
okay, so your sales numbers were by what it was, whether it was roast coffee or whether it was the kiosks or whatever, you'd have different lines for
Correct.
each of those ventures. And then the cost would be combined, everything together, because it ran through roast coffee.
Yep. One entity,
Okay.
right?
Okay, got it. So you actually would get P&L numbers every month.
Yes.
Uh-huh.
Mm-hmm.
For
Yeah,
for a
actually
for a
daily.
brand new small venture, that's pretty darn good. I mean, it's important, but not everybody does it, so it's really good to
Yep.
know.
Yeah, no, absolutely.
Your wake up call initially was when the students left in the summer. That was
Yes.
the first wake up call.
It was something, yeah. So it was something that I never projected. I guess I always thought once you start something, you start building it, and then you've got the upward trajectory. I
Yeah.
didn't realize kind of the ebbs and flows of the business and where I was in terms of where the shop was located. So for UWM, I mean, our cafe is really, really driven by UWM. So
Uh-huh.
not only is it the staff on UWM, the faculty, but also the students. So when UWM isn't in session, everyone leaves. There's
Yeah.
not many people that stay around. So that was a big wake up call for me. It was like, oh, summer's here, and there's where the students go. And it's
Yeah.
like, oh, obviously they went home, they
Yeah,
don't
right.
need to be here
Right.
through the rest of the semester. And as you know, UWM is a big commuter school. So therefore I didn't have the commuters that came to campus that had maybe, an hour or three in between classes that came to the cafe just to hang out. So
Uh-huh.
you take out that person and you take out, a $10 sale a day. So, that was a big wake up call when I realized the students weren't there, and wow, how am I gonna last through summer? So
Okay, now down the road, you were slugging it out. This is 6 or 7 years into it,
right.
and you figured that you were getting by, but barely, I guess, at that point. And was it a realization that you had to have food, or was it just something, hey, let's try this, or?
I think I exhausted all the things that I thought I could do in order to become more profitable.
Mhm.
As I mentioned, we first started off just really traditional with our coffee drinks. When I realized that people didn't want that, that's when I transitioned into more profitable drinks with a lot of the flavors. So we started developing those drinks. Then we went into a chai menu and developed a whole chai menu. So our menu was based around drinks, and that was pretty much it. We had bakery in the cafe, but mostly our sales were derived from our drinks. So, when you realize that drinks aren't making it, the bakery also isn't making it, we don't have the volume of people that we need in order to hit those targets that we need to do. That's when I realized I need to do something different, and the natural progression was adding food. So
Okay, now the bakery that you had, you would just buy pastries and bring them in and then sell them in
and
the.
resell them from there. Yep.
Yeah. Okay, now when you did the food, I know you had to have a grease trap, and you didn't have the money to buy it and
Right.
install a grease trap.
Correct.
Tell me that story.
So, when I realized we're not making any money, like we're going into At that particular time, we were starting the fall semester, and I knew that winter was going to be bad. Just the the ebb of the winter, I knew was going to be really dramatic. And I think that's when I realized that I don't have enough money in order to make it through another lull.
Mhm.
So as I started thinking about food, and I got the quotes for the grease trap, I mean, at the time it was several $1,000s, and it was several $1,000s that I didn't have. And as I talked to one of my customers about it, he's always a curious guy. He still comes into this very day. And
Hmm.
so, Pat's just like, I'm hearing about this food and this grease trap. What's this all about? So I explained that I needed a grease trap in order to do food at the cafe. And, it was several $1,000s. I didn't have the money. But this was the next progression that I think I needed in order to, sustain the business. So, I showed him the quotes on it, and he's like, this is a lot of money. And he essentially said, all right, I can write a check for half of it. And
Wow.
I said, well, what does that mean? I'm like, I don't have the money to pay you right now, and he's just like, give me coffee credit. And
Wow.
essentially what he said was, this is, I would rather see a business here rather than an empty storefront. And he was a neighborhood person. So from the neighborhood perspective, he's like, I come here every day. He's like, I love it here. I believe in you. I believe in this business. I'd rather see you here than an empty storefront.
Wow.
So if this will get you through to that point, he's like, I will give you a check for half that amount. So
Wow.
I took that check. I called up the plumber and had actually, as another story, I was talking to my landlords about it as well. And I said, I'm looking to add this grease trap in here. Would you do it for me? And they said, no, that's something you can do. So they called me up one day and said, hey, we've got a retail shop that has a grease trap in it that, it's an old Donamo's Pizza. Went out of business. If you want the grease trap, you can come and pick it up.
No kidding.
And that's how I got the initial grease trap itself. So I didn't have to buy the grease trap, but essentially I took it out of an old building, and it was, a gagging experience, because me not knowing how grease traps work is they collect all the grease from all the food from the sinks, and it's just gross. So I took this grease trap, and it was like, I couldn't bleach it out enough. It just reeked, it smelled, but I knew I needed this in order to save money. So grabbed this grease trap, called up my plumber. They went and installed it. And the day that I started serving food is when our sales popped 30%. So
Wow. Boy, what a move.
it was something
Do
that
you
I
still
needed.
have the same grease trap or did you
No,
upgrade?
it actually, it rusted through. So I
Oh,
had to
no.
get one, but
6 months?
no, it lasted quite a while. And it just like, a car or anything like that, it just started rusting and the bottom rusted out. So it started leaking. And then that's when I needed a new one. And now they make grease traps in plastic, so they don't rust. And, so I've got it set
That's
now.
all right.
It's all
But by
right.
that time, you had increased your sales and your profit so that you could have some cash flow to upgrade.
Correct. Exactly. So,
Now, one of the things that we harp on in the class is that you need to have monthly financials.
mhm,
You can try to manage it out of your checkbook, but that can be very deceiving. You
right.
you may think you've got money, but you may be losing money
Yes.
every day.
Every day for that matter. Yeah.
So you really were smart to have financials just from the start, and you've continued that ever since.
Correct. But I want to add something to that, because even though I had access to the financials, I didn't particularly know how to use them to the best of their ability. And I think even having the financials also can be deceiving, because, on one point you're thinking like, oh, every day, I got sales coming in and my bank account is building, but yet you need to be thinking out, to whatever, to weeks to months out to figure out how much you need in order to make it through those particular times. So, I mean, I had the financials, I saw what I was doing, but I also deep down realized that I wasn't making any money. I mean, even though I was showing money in my P&Ls and I was increasing my balance sheet, it didn't feel like I was making money.
You were always drained for cash.
You're always trained for cash. Exactly.
Yeah.
It's like I always couldn't have enough. And that's when I started thinking like, all right, I've got my customers that come in every single day. I could throw a dart at our sales every day. I mean, we just had that much of predictability, but I wasn't really making any money. And that's when I developed a spreadsheet. I read a couple of books, and from those books, I created this spreadsheet.
Do you remember the name of any of the books?
One was How to Scale Up Your Business.
Uh-huh.
Actually, let me grab them. I got them both.
Okay, great.
All right. The
Yeah.
first one, actually, there are a couple of my favorite books, actually.
Okay.
One is called Confronting Reality.
Uh-huh. And who's the author?
Larry Bossidy.
How do you spell that?
Larry, last name is Bossidy, Bossida or IDY,
Uh-huh.
Bossidy. And the other author is Ram Charan, Ramcharan.
Uh-huh.
And Ram Charan is a executive level consultant. He did a lot of work with like GE, Honeywell,
Big companies.
yeah, big companies. So he's the guru when it comes to this.
Mm-hmm.
Larry Bossidy was an executive over at GE, and then he moved over to Allied Signals. Allied Signals was eventually bought out by Honeywell, and he also became the CEO. He came out of retirement to become the CEO of Honeywell back in the day.
Wow.
So,
Okay.
Confronting Reality, and then the other book was called Execution, and Doing What's Right in Order to Get Things Done, something of that
Do
nature.
you remember the author of that one, the execution
Yep,
book?
it's still Larry Bossidy and Ram Charan.
Same guys. Okay,
Same
good.
guys. So they wrote Execution first, which talked about like how to get things done essentially in the business world. I mean, the question that I always had was how are these CEOs of these big companies able to pinpoint what they're going to make every quarter in terms of their financials, and also how to grow their business. So these two guys really put the spotlight on how to do that, and it just all became clear to me. So Execution was the first book that they wrote, and kind of the precursor to that is the Confronting Reality book, which was another one of my favorite books. So
Great.
those two kind of like where it's essentially the MBA program for me. If I would have read those books instead of gone to my MBA class, I think I would have saved myself a ton of money, and I think I would have gotten just as much insight. So,
Wow.
I got a lot of respect for those guys. So when I read those books, those helped me with business essentially, and really working the aspect of business. And then the second book I read was called Scaling Up, and it was Mastering the Rockefeller Habits. And the name of the author is Vernon Harnish. Last name is spelled Harnish. And it talked about how to really create companies through the people, the strategy, the execution, and then also the cash basis. And the last book that that I love is called Simple Numbers, Straight Talk, Big Profits. And it was written by a guy by the name of Greg Crabtree. Last name is spelled Crabtree. And
Okay.
Greg is an accountant,
Uh-huh.
and he put this together, this book that is just absolutely brilliant. So between the straight numbers book and scaling up, I created this spreadsheet that I use to basically manage my business right now. So
So it's lasted for some time. It's
yeah,
that spreadsheet.
yeah. I mean, I use it I set out my targets every month, and from that point, it basically it scales my business because I can understand how much I expect to make per month, where all my money is going, and whether I'm going to have money at the end of the month or not. But it puts it in a way that I'm able to see what behaviors that I need to do as the business owner, where I need to spend the money, and what I need to do in order to generate a profit every single month.
Boy,
So,
that's great. That's
yeah.
really great. Yeah.
So I guess I feel like a lot of these things, like you can teach people about entrepreneurship. You can teach them how to read financial statements. You can teach them how to start businesses. But there's an element that's missing, I think, where when they do it, they understand it, and when they start asking questions and digging deep into it is when they realize what they actually have to do in order to make a profitable business, or do the right thing, or grow. So I think there's just an inherentness where you just need to do the work and figure out, make adjustments from there in order to grow the business.
Okay. You're saying you really got to get involved.
You got to get
really,
involved. Yep.
Yeah, you got to know where the money's going, where the money's coming from, and
Right.
making decisions along the way. Yeah.
Correct.
Well, those are great books. I'm going to get them.
Good. Do it.
Looks like it's good reading. Now you've bumped along pretty well with your food and your coffee.
Yep.
And then the kiosk thing came along, and that was a completely different sort of thing, but based upon the same product.
Correct.
And your stories there were really interesting on how you tried and really didn't do well, and then you tried again, and then finally you tried a third time, and it was a booming success. And it said, "Hey, this can be a business that can
Right.
be successful." Have you continued doing the kiosks?
Yeah, actually. So with the kiosk business, once I started food, and I kind of had some breathing room with the cafe, once everything kind of stabilized. It's like, all right, we got some money coming in. We're able to pay our bills. I'm able to pay myself. And you realize, like, okay, this is something that's sustainable. This is something that will continue to grow over time. And I got a call from my ex-mother-in-law about a woman who sets up these events for essentially bikers, like motorcyclists. And they wanted a coffee kiosk at one of their events. So my ex-mother-in-law and I started talking about how to do this. And, she actually brought me in because she's like, you're more interested in coffee and that side of the business. She also owned a coffee shop, but she's like, you're interested in this stuff. So what about setting up a coffee kiosk at one of these Harley Davidson rallies? So as we kicked it around, we realized that we didn't have, a way of really doing it. I mean, in order to do it right, you needed an espresso bar, you needed a coffee brewer, and you needed some way in order to serve it. So we realized that we couldn't do it for this particular event. But what I realized is that it changed the dynamics of making money within the coffee industry. I mean, there's only so much that you can do in a cafe, because I believe that people know what a cup of coffee costs, and it's pretty much standard throughout all the coffee shops you go to. They know how much a latte costs or a vanilla latte. So there's not much room in order to increase your numbers there. So what I realized is with the kiosk side of the business, you've got a mass amount of people. So you get the volume of people. You could charge more for your product because you're at an event, and you've got less overhead costs as well. So I realized that it really shifted the dynamics of making money. So I figured if I could set up a coffee kiosk, if I could do it fairly inexpensively, it could start making some money right off the bat. So first event that I went to was, involved travel costs, it involved employees, and I ended up just losing a ton of money. And second event ended up getting rained out. And then the third event ended up being the lightning bolt, where you realize, like, everything that you thought that this business could be, it became, where, the business model worked. And, from that point forward, it was just kind of like figuring out where those events are, how to get involved with those events, and building a kiosk that's attractive to people and gets people to drink coffee at these particular events.
How many kiosks do you have now?
I've got 5 kiosks right now.
Uh-huh.
So we can essentially, set up and do 5 events, in a weekend for that matter.
Oh, that's great.
So that's all the espresso bars, all the coffee bars, all the kiosks themselves, and all the equipment associated with each of those.
Great.
So
now you also have done some wedding cake catering. Is that right?
Yeah.
Is it just coffee?
We've done a fair amount, and actually that's where most of my money is derived from.
Really?
Are these weddings and events. Like, for instance, once we got finished with the kiosk season, the kiosk kind of unlocked everything. So we've got the cafe, we learned how to do coffee and hone our skills. When the kiosk came, like I said, it became a different dynamic for making money in the coffee industry. And then finally, it was the event work, or the catering work. So, the same customer that helped me out with the grease trap, his name is Pat. Pat was a wedding photographer. So after we got done with the kiosk season, we moved into winter. We couldn't do the kiosk outside because our equipment is all based on water, and water freezes in the winter. So, we transitioned to doing some of the catering events. So when I got talking to Pat about it, I said, do you think people would like this at their weddings? Do you think they would buy an espresso bar for their wedding? And he connected me with a few other people. And, as we talked about it and about what to charge, no one was doing espresso bars at the time. So, or there was one person in particular, he was kind of dipping his toe in. So in my world, it was a wide open field, but, I priced it high enough where it was affordable, not cheap. And we started setting up these espresso bars at weddings and events. So as we started doing wedding shows, not only did we get the brides, but we also started getting people that own companies that wanted us at their particular event, whether it be an employee appreciation or, say like, holiday party or something of that nature. So we started getting some jobs from that point. So we got the corporate side, we got the wedding side. So we ended up, and that was the point in time when everything kind of took off in terms of my financials and profitability. Because
that's been the most profitable part of your business now?
That's the most profitable part of my business. Yep.
That's great. And the cash is good because you get a deposit, right?
Yep. So I structured it in such that whenever a person signed the agreement, I took a retainer, and I called it a retainer because a deposit, if the event doesn't happen, you have to give deposits back. But retainer is you're retaining the date. So that's a way for me to be able to say, all right, we're holding the date for you, and you are showing that you want this by giving us money for it. And if it doesn't happen to work out that day, we'll work with you in order figure out another day that'll work best for you. But we're
Mhm.
not giving the money back.
Yep,
That's
there you
kind of
go.
what
Okay.
I said.
Yeah.
So we took a 40% retainer in order to retain the date. So we had cash coming in right away. The way we arranged it is that they needed to pay by full by the time the event actually happened. So a lot of our corporate work, we can actually send out the agreement and say, all right, here's how much it's going to cost. We need the payment before the event. We'll set up, we'll be there the day of the event. We'll work through it. And at the end of the event, we're gone and that's it.
Wow, that's great.
So you got
Great.
cash flow,
Yeah.
cash coming in.
Terrific. Yeah,
So,
terrific. Well, along comes COVID.
yeah, yeah.
And how did that change things a year ago?
So I want to go back to the spreadsheet because once I created that spreadsheet, it must have been 4 or 5 years ago.
Mhm.
And I really worked a spreadsheet and got roast to the point where we're making money. We had money in the bank. We were paying down debt. And my goal was to become debt free, except for all the current liabilities.
Mhm.
So all the long-term debt, I wanted to retire. That included everything from the kiosk, all my equipment, everything in terms of the shop. So I was working really hard in order to get those things done. And I'd finally paid them off essentially at the end of 2019.
Wow,
So
that's great.
2020 happened and, I've got cash in the bank. I'm in a good position. I'm feeling good about, the businesses that are created and where we're going with them. And then we started having a lot of events happening. Like there was the PGA golf tournament up in Whistling Straits that was happening in 2020. We had the DNC, that was another big event that was happening. I mean, so you had these massive events happening, and it was like, this is going to be a breakout year for us.
Yeah, yeah.
COVID hits, and it was almost like a neutron bomb hit, where
Yeah.
if all the people disintegrated, all the buildings stood, and here you are as a business, like you've got no one coming in. All these events dried up. All my weddings got canceled. There's no one coming into the shop. So here I am just kind of like sitting dead in the water, just
Oh
like,
man.
where did everything go? And, with my cash position, I was able to basically have just the outstanding, my outstanding financials or liabilities. So I was basically a month out, paid all those out, and we were closed down all of the month of April. And during that time, I was, it was just surreal to me that,
Mm.
you
How
know,
could this be happening?
yeah, and what is going on? And
Yeah.
you think like, oh, it's going to be over and done with in a month. It's just like, all
Mhm.
right, this is just a blip. We're going to get back to business. Everything's going to be fine. And it wasn't. So, I had enough things to keep me occupied through the month of April, but it's just like, I'm getting bored. We got to do something here.
Yeah.
And at that particular time, it was kind of like, all right, let's set a kiosk outside and right outside the cafe. We know how to do mobile coffee, and let's see if we can get some customers to come. And what we realized is that everyone had been holed up in their house for 2 months at that time. And we're absolutely loving this because they could go outside, they had something to do, they could get their coffee, they had some sort of social interaction. And we ended up running the kiosk through the rest of the summer into the
Was
fall.
that equivalent to your
No,
normal cafe or
it,
no?
what it
It was
was,
small.
it was cash. It was cash coming in.
Uh-huh.
So it was essentially, let me think about it, maybe a quarter, maybe
Quarter of the
less than a
volume?
quarter of what our sales were in the cafe.
Uh-huh.
So
But it was something.
it was something, and that's what we needed. We needed something, and I
Mhm.
needed to keep my people working, and we just needed to do something, and that's what we chose to do. So, but the good news is the government had a lot of programs. They had the PPP.
Right?
So I was able to get the 2 rounds of PPP. The city of Milwaukee, I think, also had a grant. So we ended up getting some money from that. But it it was the government helping businesses like mine survive.
Right.
I mean, restaurant businesses took it on the chin because people were told to stay away from us. So
Right.
therefore, I mean, it's like, wait a minute, we have hygiene practices that are
Yeah.
far better than what you have at your house, but yet
Right.
telling people that we're dangerous, and it's like it didn't make
Crazy.
yeah, it was crazy. It didn't make any sense. So, but yeah, the other piece, they had an economic impact disaster loan that was a loan, and we ended up getting that as well. So
Mhm.
I took that loan and basically rolled in some of the other debt that I had at that time. I think I had minimal, like I said, minimal debt at the time, but rolled it all into one, and it was a low interest rate. So it was one of those things that you just did. You took it.
Yeah.
You took money. It's like refinancing your house. So, but yeah, so COVID happened, and then in the fall we ended up reopening the cafe, and then even when we went from the kiosk to the cafe, our sales went down because people were used to seeing us outside in the kiosk, and when the kiosk wasn't there, they're like, oh, they must be closed down. So
Yeah. Right. Yeah.
our sales went down, but now we're on the upward trajectory where we ended up changing our menu in terms of our drinks, in terms of our sandwiches, and kind of refocusing on what we're doing. And we're seeing an increase right now. So, but I mean, it's just devastating to think that from a business perspective, we didn't have any weddings, we didn't have any events. So 2/3 of my business was down. The only thing that was operating was the cafe, and we can't operate it at the normal capacity. So we had to change our hours, we changed our pricings, we changed our menu, we reduced our labor. So, I mean, we were basically a shell of what we once were. But it's getting to the point right now where we're adding some employees and we're starting to see some events come back. And that's, we're starting to see some money coming in the door. I mean, certainly not profitable, but I know that it's going to be gangbusters once everything reopens.
Yeah.
We're going to see a pretty good economic run, I think, for the next couple of years at least.
Do you see opening up next 2 or 3, 4 months?
So once UWM goes back in session in the fall, that's when we'll pretty much go back to what we normally were doing. So our normal hours are essentially 7 a.m. to 6 p.m. Monday through Friday, 8 a.m. to 6 p.m. Saturday and Sunday. So we're going to go back to our full days, we'll increase our staffing levels as well. So I see that coming back in the fall.
Okay. What do you think about the events, weddings, and things like that? I just went to a wedding last weekend in Minneapolis. It was a ball. People were just crazy. They couldn't wait to get out.
Right. And I think that's exactly what I'm seeing, is that people are to the point where they want something else, they want that sociability. And that's the one thing that they've been missing for the past year and a half. So I do see events coming back. Actually, I just signed a contract with a big building. It's 777 down on Van Buren, which is one of the new big high rises.
Right.
So the woman who contacted me said, we want to do this on the 35th floor, which is the top floor. It's outside, so you get full views of the city. And we have the espresso bar from 7 a.m. to 9 a.m. So
beautiful.
It's, we've got events like that coming back. People are getting a little bit more maybe creative with the way that they're doing these events. So whether it be outside, whether it be on top of buildings, I mean, these are the fun things that I think become really attractive, to do events at. So we did one back in February, and it was an outdoor event, and that was also a lot of fun. So
was it in the South or was it here?
It was here. It was out in Brookfield, as a matter of fact, in your backyard.
My gosh, outside. Gee, outside. That's great. That's great. I love it.
Yeah.
Well, gosh, this is really helpful. The financial part of it is often a terrific challenge for entrepreneurs because you had an interest in accounting. Most of them run the other way.
Sure. Well, I want to make clear though, like accounting and the classes in accounting, I never understood. Like credits and
never
balances
did any good. Yeah.
Never never made sense to me. But making money and understanding how money flows through the business was really interesting to me.
Okay.
So that's kind of where my interest lied. So it's more on the P&L side rather than the traditional accounting side.
Yeah.
Um,
Okay. Well, that's great. This is really helpful. I appreciate it. We're working on the portion of the study that relates to accounting and finance and the importance of getting feedback timely.
mhm.
One of my friends started a business and didn't get any financials for the whole year. He managed it out of his checkbook. And what he did is he bought capital equipment, went to the bank and borrowed on it. Then he'd buy more and he built it more and more and more. It was like a Ponzi scheme. When his
Sure.
business slowed down, the cash slowed down and he went bankrupt.
Right.
It was 18 months, he was kaput. And if he'd have had financials as he went along, he'd realize that, hey, this is a Ponzi scheme. I'm not really making money. I'm creating some cash flow. But when this building of more and more volume stops, I'm in big trouble.
Right.
And that's what happened. Yeah.
Yeah.
So this is fascinating, and I appreciate sharing the books. I'm going to get them.
Sure.
It sounds like they're really good.
Yeah. I mean, Scaling Up is a really great book.
Uh-huh.
It has a whole section on cash in there, and
Whole section on what?
cash,
Cash.
cash,
Okay.
cash flow.
Yeah.
And they give an example in there of a furniture company, and it's similar to what you just described, where they went to the bank, and they described it as growing broke.
Growing
So
broke.
this company was showing massive sales every year and turned into like a $42 million furniture company, but they were growing broke. And
Huh.
the bank came in and said, we're calling your loans. And these guys particularly said, what do you mean you're calling our loans? We're making money. I mean, we're increasing our sales by millions of dollars each year. How could we be growing broke? And it broke it down to exactly how they were doing it. And when I started looking at those numbers, I'm like, wow, it's one of those things you don't target, you don't understand until you really study it, and then you see like what is actually happening.
Yeah. Yeah.
And the particular guy who was a contributor to that particular chapter was Greg Crabtree, and that's where he came out with his book, Simple Numbers, Big Profits. And through those combination of those two books is where I created this spreadsheet from that, ultimately shine the light on where I was and what I needed to do in terms of this business, and in order to get it on proper footing. So
Scaling Up is by whom?
by Verne, Verne. Last name is Harnish, Harinsh.
Okay. I'm going to get them right away.
They're great books. I mean,
Yeah. Well,
they're-
good, Ryan. Boy, I really appreciate this hour. You've added a lot, and I think your experience can help a lot of people. What you've done and what people need to do. Boy, it's not taught in the books. Usually, it's something that you learn by doing.
Yep. I
That's
think
great.
there's a curiosity that comes with it. If is for me, it's a lot of questions. Like I don't understand, and I've got these questions, and until I find the answers, that's when things really hit home. Just kind of like, this is the answer that I was looking for. It's almost like, the crystal ball on things, I
Right.
think.
The light comes on. Yeah.
It comes on. Yep. So,
Well, great. Well, good luck. It sounds like you're on the upswing now, and
well, we're
we'll
working on
stop
it.
in and have a cup of coffee one of these days.
There you go. All right.
Okay, great, Brian. Thanks again. Really appreciate it.
Absolutely. Take
Okay,
care.
take care. Bye-bye.